Happy Pride, and welcome to Reader Seeks Romance Channel's Romance Roundup, the #1 romance book recs talk show. I am Liz Donatelli.
And I'm Libby Kay, author of the new release When Sparks Fly, part of the new series Pine Grove FD, available now through Inkspell Publishing.
Throughout the month of June, Libby and I are chatting with authors of LGBTQ Romances, published in 2025. Today's guest is Timothy Janovsky, author of Once Upon You and Me, a charming age gap gay romance. Once Upon You and Me, released April 29th from Harlequin's Afterglow Books. Watch Romance Roundup on Reader Seeks Romance Channel and subscribe on YouTube. Listen to Romance Roundup on PodBean and all podcast apps. Hi, Timothy. Welcome to Romance Roundup.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to be here, and happy Pride.
Yes,
Yay.
Happy Pride. It's so nice to meet you. I'm so excited I get to be in on this interview.
So lovely to meet you, and I'm very excited to chat and talk a little bit more about What's Upon You and Me.
So, Timothy, the book blurb for Once Upon You and Me is, quote, charming fairy tale meets spicy bedtime story. Now, since archery is shown on your book cover, would you say that Robin Hood is your inspiration?
Ooh, that's a great question. I would say that I don't actually think it ever entered the equation, but I do have a very loving part of my heart for Robin Hood because I would watch it a lot as a child. Archery generally comes about in the book. I lovingly refer to the book as my sexy archery book. But it is a lot more of a Prince Charming vibe than it is. But we do have that rugged mountain man of manager Ethan. So he has some, heroic Robin Hood-esque qualities, I would say. So yeah, definitely. I definitely didn't think of it though. So you are the first person to mention that to me.
Well, I'm glad to hear that. I feel like, Libby, we've had this discussion, or someone mentioned to us about having had a crush on the animated fox who played Robin Hood in the Disney movie many years ago, which I've always enjoyed that movie, but I didn't know it was a thing. Have you heard of that, Timothy?
Oh yes, I have heard of it. And I wouldn't say that I had a crush, but I mean it's when you watch it, you think like, wow, he has a certain like je ne sais quoi. Like there's just something about him that just brings that aura forward. And I feel like that there are a lot of Disney leading men, no matter like what form. I mean, I always found the genie very charming in Aladdin, We just have a lot of right. He's got a great sense of humor. He's got a great song. Like I think there's a lot of whimsy there.
Right. For sure. Now, being fairy tale is mentioned in the blurb, is there a particular fairy tale or story that inspired Once Upon You and Me?
Well, there is a big kind of through line generally. So the book takes place at a resort called Fairytale Endings, which is based on a conglomeration of many wedding and tourist destinations across the world where they take a bunch of fairy tales and kind of glom them together, a little bit like that TV show Once Upon a Time that was on for the longest time.
Yeah.
So each cabin is or each cottage is based off of a different fairy tale. And we meet Taylor, who is the second hero of this story, and he gets put in the Snow White cottage, which kind of is very apropos for him because he's one of 7 siblings. So he's always kind of felt like Doc, he says. He's always been the caretaker for his siblings. Whenever anybody had a runny nose, when everybody had a scraped knee, he was the one to take care of them. So there's definitely elements of that. But then there's a lot of elements of, I wouldn't say the Cinderella story rags to riches element, but a Cinderella story in the sense that there is these 2 people finally meeting at the right time. Because they've been in each other's email inboxes for a while before the story begins. But this is the first time they're in person together and sparks start flying. So I guess there's definitely an element of Cinderella in there, but there are a lot of different fairy tale references throughout the story. And one of my favorite micro tropes that popped up in this was bedtime stories as foreplay.
Oh yeah.
So that was fun to explore in the world of the book.
For those of you who are not watching, Liz and I's eyes just got really big.
Yeah, because Wow, I feel like we could
Yeah.
have a whole episode on that.
Yes, I'm obviously going to read it and I'm very excited, but I am even more excited now. So can you give like just a little hint? Like, are the story, like, is it like a hurt comfort thing or they're just telling sexy stories before bed or?
Oh, so well, there's definitely an element of hurt comfort in this story. So Taylor has been brought to Storybook Endings Resort in the Catskills because Ethan started fairy tale endings with his former wife, and the daughter they share together is about to turn 16 years old. So she's actually going to take over the whole Catskills Resort for one weekend to have all of her friends there for this big blowout party. And Taylor is like in charge of planning it. Um, Ethan is very much in a place where he thinks happily ever after has happened for him and it's never going to happen again. Like his divorce was the nail in the coffin of his fairy tale. Um, and he is lumberjacky bear. So he's very much the type of person that people believe is going to take charge and is always going to be the one to fix everything. And Taylor comes in as a personal assistant who is used to cleaning up messes, anticipating needs. Like I said, fixing scraped knees and blowing people's noses. He's like, oh, this man he needs nurturing. Like he needs care. Like, I mean, and of course there's an age gap in this story. So it's 13 years, but he kind of takes on that role of being kind of the daddy figure, if you will. The way that that comes into the story is that there's a little bit of a snafu with the story time that happens on the resort property. So it's like cookies, sugar cookies, and story time. And their reader is out for the night. And Taylor's like, well, what if I do it? And so Taylor comes in with his favorite childhood story, which is Snow White, but he wants to tell the Grimm's version, not the Disneyfied version,
Oh,
which he has some memory loss over, essentially, where he's like starting to read it to the children and thinking, oh, maybe I didn't think this through very well. And it's not a spoiler to say that these children are horrified by the situation, and he thinks Ethan's going to hate him forever. And they get back to this cottage. This is a little bit of a spoiler, but there's a bit of forced proximity that happens. And Ethan's like, children are stronger than you think. They will get over it. That was actually probably the funniest thing that has ever happened here before. And he's like, I don't remember any of these stories. Like, what if we just read them to each other? And what kind of starts as this like bottle of wine, plate of Milanos, turns into a very kind of intimate evening of, so they're not telling original stories. They're actually reading the Grimm stories aloud to each other. But they're trying on voices. They're picking their favorites. It was something that I hadn't planned on writing, but came out in a scene. And I was like, I kind of want to explore this a little bit more. So it actually comes back a few more times over the course of the book.
I would have never thought that something like that would be sexy. Like, reading bedtime stories like fairy tales and especially the Grimm's version, which is, they're pretty intense.
They are. I mean, I think there's just something about there's that like first phase of falling in love with someone where you're
Yeah.
sharing all these little pieces of
Yes.
media and stories that you kind of grew up loving and holding to.
Mhm.
And this was just a way to kind of physicalize that for these two men and to kind of explore um, a little bit of that hurt comfort. Like you said, there is this very nurturing element to their bond that came out through this sharing of stories. I think also fairy tale endings, or storybook endings, the resort. It's a place where you can't escape fairy tales, right? You're confronted with it around every turn. And Ethan actually lives on the property in a cottage he built for his family many moons ago before the divorce. And so this was also my way of Taylor being like, you could bring that back into your home, that excitement you had for this thing that you used to love. How do we refine that spark? And so it didn't start out as sexy, but it became sexy
Yes.
through the experience.
Right. And what's interesting is, and I've been saving this read for a very special time. Like I want to be in the middle of I'm taking a few vacations, and the whole fairy tale thing reminds me of a place I visited in New Jersey as a kid called Fairytale Forest. Now, Libby, you grew up in Pennsylvania. I don't know if you had ever heard of Fairytale Forest in New Jersey.
No, we either went to New York or stayed in Pennsylvania. We weren't that fancy to go to New Jersey.
Oh, okay. It was this interactive place where it had a castle and Humpty Dumpty sitting on a wall, and houses of the fairy tale characters, and a big boot for the old woman who lived in a shoe. And I thought it was so magical. And it's that feeling of you've been transported, kind of like in your book, where you're transported to this place that, values fairy tales and you're surrounded by it. And there's that forced proximity aspect to it. I'm really excited about that because Fairy Tale Forest lives in my heart.
I love that. I also think that there is like a very large contingent of us adults who want to recapture that fairy tale feeling. Now, I wouldn't say I'm a Disney adult, but I would say that I'm an adult who enjoys Disney movies and the Disney parks. But there are sometimes where you don't want to be doing the full day on a ride kind of deal, but you do still want to get that like enchanted forest feeling. And so there are these places actually around the world. I mean, I found a bunch of them that I was referencing photos and collaging maps out of that were, catered more towards adults, where they're like wedding destinations. They're places people go on their honeymoon, and they are just very enchanting. They're very exciting and fun, and they just seemed like a very sweet setting for a romance. So I hope it brings you the vacation vibes that you need.
Yes. And now you've already answered my next question, which was what the book's about. So, Libby, you could take it from here on craft.
Okay, so Timothy, this is your seventh book, right?
Yes.
Can you tell us, did anything change in your writing process from when you got started to writing this one? Like, did you notice anything came quicker, easier? Was it even harder? Could you just tell us a little bit about your writing process?
Totally. This book was pretty interesting to me. So from first book to this book, I've tried many different tools, modes, styles of kind of dropping myself into the storytelling. I recently went to an event where an author, who now I'm forgetting which author said it, but she basically said something was like, the more books you write, the harder it gets because the more lessons you've learned along the way. So you're very much trying not to fall into traps that you set for yourself. And so by book number 7, you're kind of sitting there thinking like, okay, I'm not going to make the mistakes of my past. Inevitably, you're going to make new mistakes, which, But this book was interesting to me because this was the first time that I started with a setting. So I was very inspired about writing a story that took place in a fairy tale resort. And this resort came to me and I thought, okay, let's create 2 characters who would be dropped here who may have to struggle with the themes and the vibes. This was also the first book where I wrote beginning to end chapter breakdowns. So what I did was I created mini stories. Chapter 1, chapter 2, chapter 3. I said, this is what the main action is. This is what it's going to reveal about the characters, so that I could actually, and I did this in a spreadsheet. And it was the first time that I got a macro view of the story for the first time. Because I would say I sit somewhere between a plotter and a pantser. So I am somewhat of a write as you go and discover as you go person. But I also do need to know at least the beginning, the middle, and the end. And there are pieces that I can fill in. This was the first time that I didn't really go in with any big gaps in a story. And I think I described it to a writing friend as this felt more like writing in a lazy river than swimming against the rapids, which sometimes it does. This was very much the kind of book where I was like, okay, I put on my swimsuit, I put on my swim shoes, I have my suntan lotion on, I'm getting in the tube, and I'm just going to follow the story along. And it was freeing in a way because I wanted the book to feel relaxed. I wanted the book to feel like you were on vacation. And so because I got to inhabit that space, I feel like that helped me translate the story better, to tell the story better. But I will say that the book I wrote immediately after, or the book that I was actually just working on, I tried to do the same thing again. Oh, and the characters just went kicking and screaming in every wrong direction. They would not follow the chapter breakdowns at all. So I will say that I think the one thing that has changed the most is that I've just learned to accept that every book will be different, and that my job is actually less of writer and more of creative problem solver, because every morning I inevitably sit down, write, however many words I write in that day, and I think, oh no, that doesn't match what I did before, or that's going to change what I wanted to do later. Actually, in this state, there's this law that now I need to work. There's just a myriad of things that come into play. I joke to my partner all the time that I've become a ball of factoids that nobody needs to know. Just like they would not help me on Jeopardy. They would not help me on Who Wants to Be a Millionaire. They are just truly micro, very niche facts that I learn in the creation of the story. So I think that answered the question.
Oh,
Mostly
yes,
it's more about
absolutely.
acceptance. Yeah,
Yeah.
writing is about acceptance.
No, I love it. And you kind of touched on this a little already, but you've obviously covered a lot of different tropes. Is there one that you enjoy writing more than others, or is there one that you haven't written yet that you really are looking forward to writing?
Ooh. So, I mean, what was exciting about writing Once Upon You and Me specifically was I really wanted to write a single dad romance, which I had not done before. I had also never written an age gap romance before. Most of my characters up until now have been in their early 20s. So it was kind of a departure for me, but I always find myself going back to forced proximity. I don't even intend to do it. It's never even in like the pitch that I put out there. It's just something that I always find coming back into the fray of the story. So whether it's they're sharing a roof, they have a project to work on together, I find that giving two heroes in a romance a task or a goal is a really wonderful way to keep the ball rolling towards happily ever after. And it keeps me engaged in a way because it was very much one of those kids in school who was like, oh, in the group project, like who's making the slides? Who's writing the bibliography? Like I was very interested in that. So I actually think I learned a lot about my characters through the delineation of tasks or ideas in the forced proximity situation. So, for instance, in Once Upon You and Me, Ethan has ADHD, so he is not super great about planning for his meals. And so we have a scene in the book where Taylor gets hungry on his way home from a trip that he's on, like a little outing he's on for errands, and he decides to pick up some takeout. And he's like, okay, I could call Ethan, or I could think about the other things he's eaten, and I can make him my best guess, and I'll come home and surprise him. And you can just tell this relief of this man who's been scrounging around in the fridge when Taylor walks in, and he's like, you have food? What do you mean? And I'm like, oh, okay. Now we know something about this relationship, that Taylor is the one that's going to be kind of, setting the table, if you will. So yeah, I think that trope is just so delicious.
It's one of our favorites. We gush about it on the show frequently. So
Yeah.
That's awesome.
The last question I have that's writing related, is there anything that you have to have when you're writing, whether it's a location, a playlist, a drink, a snack, whatever? Is there something you always have to have with you when you're writing?
That's a good question. I'm a big coffee drinker. I really love it. There's like a coffee company in New Jersey where I grew up and my parents still live that I actually have their ground coffee delivered every month to my apartment in Washington, D.C. because I want it so much. So it's this New Orleans dark roast that I love to drink. So my writing sessions in the morning always have that. But I have found that my favorite thing, and that no matter what, is I need to have my headphones in, noise canceling on, and I need to have a minimal vocal playlist that's the vibes of the book going. So I'm for Once Upon You and Me, which was, I guess a little interesting, but I'm a big Swiftie. So I was listening to piano and strings covers of Speak Now. That was my setting in the background for that. But I'm currently editing a book that takes place in Italy. So I'm listening to a bunch of like 1950s, 1960s Italian like film scores. Like it's just trying to set a mood for the story unfolding. I love having the kind of auditory experience to help me kind of drop into the story.
So, Timothy, on Romance Roundup, we share romance book recs. Which LGBTQ romances have you recently read and enjoyed or added to your TBR list?
Ooh, okay. So I really, really, really loved I'll Have What He's Having by Adib Khorram. Wonderful book set in the world of wine and restaurants. It has this like gorgeous found family element to it. And Adib wrote from a place, I believe, that he has lived for a long time. And so the setting is just like chef's kiss. It's just so good. So I really, really recommend that book. I also really recommend Julian Winter's I Think They Love You.
I Think They Love You.
I Think They Love You.
I believe
Yeah.
is the title. Yeah.
Yes, that was just fabulous. And the follow-up book, his follow-up adult romance is coming out soon. That's called Last First Kiss. And the directioner in me, like One Direction fandom that I was a big part of through most of my high school experience, just is in love with that title. And Julian Winters was lovely enough to send me an early copy that's like sitting on my e-reader. So that's next on my TBR to read. I also really, really recommend TJ Alexander's A Gentleman's Gentleman.
Yep. We've had a couple other authors recommend that. It is moving higher and higher up my TBR.
Yeah.
Well, the thing is that, I mean, I've met TJ several times now. I've read everything that TJ has written, and I love every one of TJ's books. And I mean, I always go back to Chef's Choice is my favorite TJ Alexander book, which is a T for T romance with like TJ, I think, lovingly refers to one of the characters as like a weird little guy. And I love that. I just love when a character has like a personality that just leaps kind of out of the story. And you can just immediately be like, I know that person. But A Gentleman's Gentleman is TJ's first foray into historical. And I have never really, outside of Adriana Herrera, been a huge historical reader. But I thought TJ's book was so wonderful, and I got to hear Adriana Herrera talk about the last book in the Las Leonas series, where she called historical romance the musical theater of romance. Like it's like the Broadway of romance because it's so big and the stakes are so high and the set pieces are so beautiful. And so I was like, all right, I'm gonna really prioritize reading A Gentleman's Gentleman, and I just ended up really falling in love with the story and the world and the way they built the characters in such truthful, honest ways while still being able to lay the groundwork for understanding the world and the social strictures that came with that time period. It's just a wonderful book.
I have to read it.
I know. And we read Chef's Kiss at our book club in Columbus. Yeah. And we enjoyed it. Yeah. So we have to add that higher and higher. We have to bump it up. What was the expression we used about? We had something.
I'm losing
we can't remember. But it was like, bump it up. Yeah. Bump it up. I don't know. I have no idea. Now it's just called Bump It Up on the TBR.
Yeah.
Like bump.
Why not?
Yeah, that's it. It's Monday.
This is another recommendation. I'm so sorry. I'm going to throw it in here because I got to moderate an event with Vanessa Vita Kelly, who just put out an illustrated novel called When the Tides Held the Moon, which is a Carney X merman romance set on Coney Island. It is also historical. When I did this event with Vanessa, I could have spoken to her for like 7 hours. I had so many questions about the research she did, how she chose what scenes to illustrate. It is just like a gorgeous, gorgeous book that's like all the best parts of The Greatest Showman, but it's also a little bit of Newsies, but it's also a little bit of The Shape of Water. It's just a delight from every turn.
I actually bought that book.
I did too. It's literally behind me on my coffee table. Because who just recommended this to us? We've been interviewing so many authors this month for Pride. I
thought it was Bookseller Nikki. I don't know.
It might have been Bookseller Nikki first, but
I bought it.
It keeps coming up. I got a gift card for my birthday, and I'm like, I'm using it. I need to read this book immediately.
Yeah.
And it's so I'm so glad that you have the physical edition because it just is so lush. There's like the end papers, the illustrations. I actually I have ADHD, so I do a lot of my reading on audio. And so I did it in tandem. So I would before bed, I'd be reading a couple chapters, looking at the images. But like if I was on my, mental health walk for the day, I would have it in my ears. And the narrators are the actors are incredible. Because there's so many people from all walks of life, so many accents. Like they were bringing these characters to life in a way that is just, I was astounding. Like I would give them an award if I could, but I'm not on a voting body to do that. So.
And the book has like heft to it. Like when I got it out of the envelope, I'm like, oh my God. And I'm guessing it's the illustrations and the ink or something. I don't know, but it felt like an experience, like unwrapping it. It was very exciting.
It would have been awesome if they did something, I don't know, some kind of special effect that when you open the book, water squirts out. And it smells a little bit fishy, like a mer person would smell in the water, but not bad fishy, like a fishy saltwater fresh.
It smells like Coney Island.
It smells like Coney Island.
Getting the funnel cake. I mean, the funnel cake smell, whatever. I mean, they're not open for the season quite yet by the beginning of the book, but yes. Oh my gosh, that would have been really fun.
Yeah.
I mean, I think I learned through that conversation that there is a contingent of MerPeople. So when I asked Vanessa about her research or their research, Vanessa was like, oh, I got to meet these people. Like I got to go and talk to them about this culture that they have built. And Vanessa was like, I bought a tale. I was like, you bought a tale? Us romance authors are really doing our research. We're getting out there. We're like,
seriously.
We're buying the props.
First fin experience instead of first hand.
Did you say first fin experience?
Yeah.
I saw a documentary about those MerPeople. About them saving to buy the handmade, custom-made tales, and how, I mean, as far as their core strength to swim around with that tail, it's amazing. But yeah, it is a whole community and everything. Yeah, I saw a whole video. Yeah, that's pretty cool. Yeah.
I mean, it's just amazing. I mean, what one piece of fiction how many roads it can lead you down when you're creating it. And you just meet the coolest people when you start digging in to these stories. And so it was just an incredible thing to hear.
Well, that's it. Bye. Well, Timothy, you are a delight. I've enjoyed catching up with you. Thank you for joining us here on Romance Roundup.
Thank you so much for having me. This was truly very wonderful. And I'm really happy we got to celebrate Pride together.
Yes, me too.
It was so nice meeting you.
Yeah.
It was so lovely to meet you. Thank you. It's for such a wonderful conversation.
And that's our roundup. Watch Romance Roundup on Rita Seeks Romance channel and subscribe on YouTube. Listen to Romance Roundup on PodBean and all podcast apps. Thanks for joining us, romance readers.
Happy reading, everyone.